Hello and welcome to the season finale episode of the Lakmé Fashion Week Podcast with me, your host, Nonita Kalra. In today's episode, we're talking about how fashion can be a weapon for self-expression for the LGBTQ community with none other than Parmesh Shahani, Roshini Kumar and Keshav Suri. Parmesh Shahani is the founder of the award-winning Godrej India Culture Lab, which sparks conversations and collaborations about the changing face of contemporary India. Parmesh is a passionate advocate for LGBTQ inclusion in corporate India and has guided many of the country's leading companies on their inclusion journeys. Roshni, aka Rosh, is an activist, photographer, visual artist, and entrepreneur. She loves taking her activism into everything she does and wants to bring an actual change to these much-needed issues. From body image issues to mental health to all things queer, Rosh likes raising awareness and talking about everything we normally don't like to talk about. Keshav Suri is the youngest executive director of the Lalit Suri Hospitality Group. He's involved in the group's expansion, quality management, marketing strategies, operations, and F&B. Under his guidance, the group established brands like 24/7, Baluchi, and OKO. His brainchild, Kitty Sue, the group's nightclub, is set to complete 10 successful years in August 2021. It is one of the longest running and most inclusive LGBTQ nightclubs in the country. It has supported acid attack survivors, hired India's only differently able DJ, and people from the deeply marginalized LGBTQ community. I want to thank you all for joining me in this conversation, which is totally unscripted. I have not sent you any questions. I have decided it has to be freewheeling, largely because I was intimidated. When I said, I get the three of you in a room, this is going to be terrifying because it's some of the finest brains, the most outspoken voices, and people who've been very free in the way they've decided to take an agenda forward. When I did all my research, I realized nothing really exists. There are puff profiles. There are stories of 10 best and 10 names you should know, but no one's really talked about the thing that you all do very, very compellingly and with a lot of integrity, is tell the story of your lives through the choices, not just of the way you live, but through your clothing, through your choice of color, through your fashion, through the way often you are performance art. And I choose these words really deliberately because Parmesh taught me this in the years that I've worked with him. He said that you can never drop your agenda for a minute if you want to make a difference. And whether you're popular or unpopular, it's something that you have to do forever. And thanks to Parmesh, I'm both obnoxious and unhireable. So thank you, Parmesh. But I really wanted to tell you that I'm having an obnoxious fangirl moment, which is very unlike me. But straight to the conversation that we're having. When I was sort of researching what fashion has meant to the LGBTQ community, and I don't know whether you want to use that term, and let's even address that. There's no documentation of what real life clothing has done or how wearing it has changed people's lives. When I look at a Marc Jacobs who's normalized wearing whatever kind of clothing he wants, and I hate the term gender fluid, and I hate men wearing women's clothing or women wearing men's clothing. He wears clothes, he wears fashion. Let me start with you, Parmesh. Why do you think none of this documentation really exists?
Thank you, Nonita. And it's just so amazing to be part of this conversation with Roshni and Keshav. And I just wish we could all be together in a room and then go out for a drink afterwards and continue. I think we'll have a lot to discuss. I think there has been documentation over the years in various parts of the world. And if you look historically or culturally, I think in various parts of the world, including the subcontinent, I think we've always had gender fluid. We've always had gender fluid fashion, as we've had gender fluid and gender inclusive societies. So if you look at historical garments or costumes, both from various, whether it's various kinds of people who have been in power or of people who have been, just regular citizens. There is gender fluidity all across, indeed, as it is in so many parts of the world. So I think what the question should be is, we've always had rich histories And as I write in my book Veristan as well, right? Indian culture or subcontinental culture is itself inherently plural, inclusive, fabulous. So I think the question is about who has been documenting these stories, what are the structures of power, both gender power and other kinds of power in play that has allowed certain kinds of stories to be told and certain kind of stories to be marginalized. And this includes stories about costumes, about fashion, about lived lives. Why is it that anthropological studies of society over the decades of certain parts of the world foreground certain people and certain cultures and habits and don't others? I think that's the lens, because if you look subcontinentally and indeed in so many parts of the world, I think we've always been playing with gender quite wonderfully. And men have always been fabulous. Women have always been experimental and things like that. It's just, so I think a lot of the baggage that we have to deal with in our world at this point is also, and it's convenient to blame it on colonialism, but it's also vital that we start talking about some of these projects, right? A lot of our attitudes, including around clothes, have changed because of the colonial project. So yeah, I'm gonna stop right there, but yeah.
Keshav, what would you like to say?
First, I'll start by saying hi. So hi, Roshini. Hi, Parmesh. Hi, Nonita. And thank you for organizing this and have, this queerly fabulous panel. When you sent me, Nonita, the conversation on today and just about gender expression, and there was this bit on mainstreaming and the whole conversation on mainstream and fashion and mainstream and LGBTQ. And I was just wondering what exactly is mainstream anymore, because all we see now in mainstream media is doom and gloom, is death around us. It's pretty much, there doesn't seem to be a really positive lining to the word mainstream anymore. And then the other thing I thought about, and I'm just going to rattle on about just a few things that I thought about when I read the email, was the Met Gala. And when they did this whole thing on camp, which was Susan Sontag's notes on camp, and how it was considered, wow, a Met Gala is doing this mainstream thing on camp, but they forget that it was written in 1962 or 1963. Times are very different. There is a lot of LGBTQ exclusion in those notes, which should have been included. There's a lot of people of color and also of different ethnicities that were sort of excluded in those notes that should have been updated, I think, for the Met Gala. And I think that in that aspect, I would have expected to see so much more than what was shown by the celebrities who are so-called the gatekeepers of mainstream, right? That what they wore, I was expecting to see Divine. There was not a single person who was wearing, who did Divine, who's really the queen of camp and grotesque. And, and I was expecting to see stuff that was sort of pushing boundaries that I didn't. So yeah, that was what I was thinking. Sorry if that's just...
No, you know what, like I said, this is going to be a conversation that's going to be a little free-flowing. All your references are Western, though. And this is what I'm trying to understand. We're sitting here. Parmesh has worked in fashion magazines amongst the first few. We'll come to Kitty Sue later. Roshini represents a new kind of fashion. But in mainstream fashion, which is why I actually asked that question, I see no value in mainstream, because I feel that mainstream becomes commercial and it's the most boring that I have seen. But why is it that an industry that has a lot of people from the LGBTQ community lacks any kind of representation beyond a certain tokenism?
So I'm guessing you're talking about the industry in India or the industry worldwide?
We're looking at the Indian fashion industry. Just
the Indian fashion industry. I think that, like Parmesh's point, traditionally there are, we were sort of gender, non-conforming when it came to fashion. It changed over the course of time. And I think that goes back to actually who are the gatekeepers of mainstream, who are the people then who are really putting these photographs in these magazines, how much are they really including voices that are beyond what is supposed to be considered marketable and profitable, because I think that's what it comes back to, especially in the fashion industry, is that who is our market, and if in that particular market they want a particular style of certain things, then we will only cater to that.
No, I also think that culturally as a society, we kind of fear self expression. And once you kind of see that in fashion in any way, because even before I came out as queer, I used to express myself the same way. There was no difference. But I know I was, always seen as this weird alien walking around. Why is she doing these things? Why is she, trying to be like this? They always see it as a way for me to maybe make a statement, but it's never maybe this is how she is, this is how she wants to be. I think that also plays into the fashion industry, because then that obviously culturally drips down, and we kind of that fear comes back to everything, right? You lack that fear of self expression. So fashion in that way, now if you see mainstream is what we want to call it, the gatekeepers of that, or fast fashion, everything is almost the same. There's no place for self expression unless it's someone who's really trying to come out and do something. All these smaller brands, or these bigger brands. So there's in between, which is mainstream. I think fears that self expression that inevitably comes from the fear from society itself, because even now we still fear so much of that. And of course, when it comes to the queer community, there's so much of taboos and so much still around, that it kind of plays down into everything, including fashion. Because for us, fashion is of course the way we express ourselves and how we enjoy it. We go out and look fabulous because of our clothes and earrings and everything, and that's still seen as, for the normal cishet people, it's still seen as too much. Like, why are they acting like this? Why are they being like this? But there's no why. It's just how we are. We've never tried to be like this. It's just who we are. And I feel that that lack of understanding has kind of caused the lack of representation as well.
So I was, Roshni, as you were talking, I was thinking about there have always been queer people in fashion, right? And I think a good way of breaking this would be to look at, queerness and fashion. Is it queer people in fashion, and then queerness as a lens, queerness as an aesthetic, queerness as a way of viewing and changing the world. So I think if we can separate the two, right? If queer people in fashion, since fashion began, right, even in our country, right? I mean, if you go all the way back to Rohit Khosla, all the way back, right? I mean, if you look at the early designers of even who think of it as fashion, right? I mean, Indian fashion in a sense began with queerness. So we've always had fashion designers, we've had stylists, we've had models, we've had a lot of people who make fashion are queer. Producers are queer. 6 to 10% of any population is queer. So which means a lot of the fashion consumers are queer. I think what hasn't happened is that people in positions of power are not queer. So which means, editors will be, you and others included, will be well-meaning allies, but cishet. CEOs will mostly be men still, heterosexual men and so on, right? So which means queerness even though we have producers, we have the fashion makers, there are enough queer people, the fashion decision makers are not. So queerness is always something that is kind of allowed, encouraged, etc. But no one has a stake in it. And I see the difference in hospitality, right? Taj, Oberoi, the Leela, all these other hotel groups can have well-meaning people who are working in it. But it's fundamentally different when I stay at the Lalit, because the owner is queer. So when you are in a position of power, then how you engage with others, how you create the conditions for your community to flourish, how you use it to become an advocate, is fundamentally different. So I think we need more queer people in positions of power for that to fundamentally change. So that's one, and we should talk about how we get there. But I think if you look at queerness as an aesthetic, as a gaze with which to view the world, I mean, Indian and global fashion is very queer. Fashion leads the way. Our queer gaze, our designers and stylists have enabled someone like a Ranveer to shape himself as this gender fluid kind of heterosexual icon, and has hopefully paved the way for other men to kind of explore with, how do we try out various aspects of masculinity. So I think queerness as an aesthetic, I mean, fashion cannot exist without queerness as an aesthetic, because queerness is a way of seeing the world, differently. So yeah.
I actually think that even women would not have had the ability to wear the clothes they did without the backing of a queer aesthetic or a queer gaze, because it freed you from the male gaze. And so that sort of brings me, and I've always felt that fashion, the industry is a very safe space for young queer people, because you're embraced, you're welcomed, you're allowed to celebrate your creativity. But when you go outside, it's still not okay for you to dress the way you do. You still sort of, your self-expression is hampered, but it has really helped women go a step further. How do you then still find your joy? How do you use fashion as a tool, or maybe even a weapon, to continue what I'd like to call the good fight, in a sense?
So for me, honestly, when I've always wanted to use fashion as my tool or weapon, both of them. But when I was young, just like everyone else, there was a lot of body image issues and a lot of bullying, which led me to completely not be who I am today. I was the exact opposite of that because I was so scared. But in between somewhere, I kind of realized that, why am I not living the life that I really want to lead? Because I don't have to lead it for others. This is my own life. So I started doing everything I wanted to, from coloring my hair to getting everything. But when I started doing my activism, was when I started realizing, because I do a lot of activism with body image issues and body positivity, body neutrality, self-love, because that has been my journey through the years. And there's nothing that was taught to me, that I could actually wear the clothes I want and, actually embrace the body that I'm in without having to feel so bad about myself. I started seeing how fashion needs to be inclusive in a way that it includes every body type, every person of color, every sexuality, everything. And that representation wasn't there then for me, and it is getting there now, of course. But for me, I fully embraced myself, but I also want to. I recently just started. I did a collaboration with a brand to start clothes where it's fully gender neutral. The clothes that I'm wearing are from that, where basically I take my inspiration from the 80s and 90s. So all the prints are like that, but it's fully gender neutral. And everyone, I tried it on like a bunch of people to just see if it looks good on everyone, which it did. But I also wanted the clothes to bring their self-expression out, not just mine. Because I think what happens is, when most of the clothes that I used to wear looked good on me, but it was not what I wanted to wear. I wanted to layer it or play around with it, have fun with it, and I couldn't do that. So in the future, I hope I'm able to enable this in a bigger way, because I just started this like last month. I hope it brings more people to see the need for self-expression, because once you express yourself through fashion, it really brings out your own style, that unique style that is just yours. You don't have to follow any trend, you don't have to follow any celebrity. Once you bring yourself out, I think that unique style just remains as yours, and that becomes like your own aesthetic. And you can play around with anything. Like, I wear bindis with everything, and it's looked good for years, and people just don't understand how. And I'm like, you just wear it if you want it, it looks good, that's it. So that's something I wanted to do, is where I wanted, what I was not given as a child was the freedom that I could express myself through various forms of fashion. And also that my body type is absolutely okay to wear the clothes that I want to, and I don't have to be shamed. So those are two things I want to help physically also reach people, because I think even the queer youth and normal, even the cishet youth, they all go through the same things. They're bullied for their body types, they're bullied for being different, they're bullied for thinking different. The cycle keeps going on, and I feel like there needs to be some stop at some point, and I want to contribute however little I can.
But I was saying, it really makes me wonder who is normal and who has the authority to set these rules. Keshav, you walked into a corporate world, right? Where I guess people, the suits think they're normal. And you walked in and you said, well, I'm going to make a change, and I'm going to do it not just with the way I hire and with policies and with the way I treat people, but I'm going to give it a very outward symbol of Kitty Sue and bringing drag queens in and allowing people to use fashion in the most joyful, extravagant way as fashion should be celebrated. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how hard was it?
So thank you for that question, Nonita. Roshni, I was just, what you said about the 80s, I'm also completely in love with the 80s. And, what I forgot to say in my earlier answer also on camp, for me, the biggest camp goddess and the biggest drag artist in India at that time was Rekha and was Khoon Bhari Maang. And I realized that Sandeep Khosla and Abu Jani did the costumes for that. And I think that, I mean, wow, right? And and not much. Okay, maybe the movie was a bit too camp, but the costumes were just divine. And I think that stop.
Also, I want to say something. This is the first time I'm happy to be old because I lived through the 80s and 90s. So there.
And so you remember when Khoon Bhari Maang came out.
I dressed like that. So let's not even. I have the clothes.
So there you go. And that was, drag at that time. And that was Rekha wearing a jumpsuit and wearing a turban and completely wearing, gender non-conforming clothing for a woman. Then she went into another movie called Madam X, and where she had a similar style as well in that. So I think that whether or not commercially those movies were successful or not, but the fact that they did it, and they did it at the time of the 80s. Sometimes I feel that the newer Bollywood stars and all that we're seeing in terms of consuming they're not as risky as they used to be. They're not as fashion forward as they used to be. That visual assault of print on print on print, now it's become very monotone and it's become very like sort of black and gray. And sort of, I think as time has progressed, we started conforming a bit. And that's why I'm so in love with what Roshni just said and what she's trying to do. Because, I myself have had massive body issues. I still have body issues. And in a big way, and especially during the lockdown, I feel I've put on so much of weight, and I feel like I have to wear clothing on top of clothing to hide the fact that I'm not comfortable in my body. I haven't been comfortable in my body since I was a kid. And so for me, fashion was that way of actually overcoming a lot of my self-doubt. And when you said walking into the boardroom, yes, I decided that I was not going to maybe it was my coping mechanism, that not my vulnerabilities show in the boardroom. So I'd rather than just wear this armor of clothing. And then my sexuality became my armor as well. And when I came back from the UK and after studying and started and joined the business when my father passed away, the first thing I decided was that I am queer, I'm proud gay man. I'm not going to have my sexuality become a boardroom conversation, a side conversation in front of my face. And that is one of the reasons why when I came back, it was very important for me to get it out of the way in my boardroom with my mom, with my sisters, that I am gay. And then let's move on from that aspect. Yes, I have a partner who later became my husband. We are going to be coming to the hotel. We are going to be holding hands. We may make out sometimes in the bar, maybe. So, and then seeing that, and I was like, okay, so if I'm going to do that, a lot of other people are going to do the same too. This then becomes much bigger than my needs, my sexuality, and my vulnerability. It becomes for the community that I'm saying I'm representing, but I'm not a gatekeeper of. I'm just one of many. But at least it gives them and me a safe space, so that if there is another couple that is walking hand in hand, they feel safe. And then it became, okay, I want to start, when Kirisu started, it was basically between the reading down from the High Court in 2009 to 2013 when it came back. We opened Kirisu in 2011. And at that time, I think it was the queerest straight club ever, because I just didn't want to give it only for queer or only for straight or only that kind of thing. I wanted it to be, inclusive. And in actuality, it was if I did drag, or if it was another sort of self-expression of myself on my journey, on my gender identity as well. Because I did drag when I was a kid in a Catholic school, which was fine, but sexuality wasn't. So then Kirisu was just my alter ego. And then when the Supreme Court brought back 377, is when I decided that no, this has to now specifically cater to the queer community. And then it wasn't just about, okay, we cater to the queer community. We have to have people that look like the queer community as well, to be on stage, to be in the background, to be to be in the administration as well. Because there's one thing to go after a community and say that, okay, we want your money. But then the other thing is to actually put your own money where your mouth is. And that was why it was so important for Kirisu to become, strangely, a nightclub which is meant to discriminate, right? Hotels, 5 stars, these are known places where you look at how a person is wearing, the suits walk in, and everyone, has to look a certain way. And then here came this, which completely changed the fabric and the ethos. And yes, I think it was because I decided not to wear a suit myself. So I don't know if that answers it.
Did the fashion surprise you at any point? I think I was blown away by how forward the fashion was, how extravagantly beautiful. And I think in our quest between, some of the trends we've had and the norm core that we were seeing, the exuberance of the fashion gave me a lot of joy. Did that surprise you? And do you have any fashion moments you remember? And I'm going to ask each one of you to take this question one after the other, because this podcast does also celebrate fashion, and I hope inspires people a little bit as well.
I think when all the drag artists that walked the stages of Kirisu and performed their Kirisu at Kirisu, all the queer artists, I think that those were fashion moments. My personal fashion moment, I guess, was at my wedding, when I went to designers like Shantanu and Nikhil and actually asked them, who are straight, and asked them to create and this was from the Paris wedding or the ceremony, to ask them to create sort of very gender neutral clothing, because I heavily demanded that. And then when I wore that gown that was made by Gaurav Gupta, who is openly queer, and first time ever he designed something for a man, and that was a gown. And for me to wear that in front of and dance on stage with my mother and in front of my entire team, and of course all my loved one families, I think that for me in particular was the fashion moment.
Parmesh wrote about it very, very beautifully. I felt like I was at your wedding when I read it. But he does have a magic with words. Parmesh, what was one of your favorite sort of moments in terms of fashion in sort of the whole Kirisu, the Kirisu stage?
So I want to talk about, since this is, we're talking about fashion particularly, I want to talk about 2 fashion moments on the Lakmé Fashion Week catwalk, actually, which I think have been very interesting. The first was, I think, 2003, when Rohit Bal sent down a long line of male models wearing sindoor and with skirts. And I thought that was very, very interesting, because it was the first time. And I think this is before he had actually come out openly as gay himself. So I thought, in terms of the symbolism, I thought it was very, very interesting that in 2003, because I don't remember, at least before that, we have such strong, there are queer overtones, and of course people are queer, but this kind of almost assertion, right? Because you take the silhouette, and then you take something like sindoor, which itself is like, contextual, problematic, and you repurpose it. So you queer it, and you send it out. I thought it was very interesting as a catwalk moment. And then I actually really appreciated, and our designers have been doing this for a while. But I really thought that when Queen Harish walked for Lakmé Hemant, before Queen Harish died, unfortunately, I thought it was very powerful. And I remember again being in probably alongside you, because those were the days when we would go to Fashion Week and actually sit in those rows. I remember being very, very moved, because again, it was very interesting, right? Because I think until then, and I think what unites these two is that both took very desi elements, right? So Queen Harish is not Pepper or anyone from RuPaul, which is amazing, right? Queen Harish is rooted in a desi pan. And for Lakmé Hemant to do that as well, which is Indo-French, you have this level of, meta level after level of then saying, we will tap into a Queen Harish, which I thought was very, very interesting. It was talking about really that in today's global world, how all these circuits come together, and you can tap into your deep-rooted Indianness to speak a very global language. So for me, I've loved it when Indian fashion has done this, when we've used our catwalks to actually make very strong. And of course, there have been very other overt messages, like Nari will do a film about lesbian love and all of that. But to me, that's not as powerful as these other moments. But yeah, I mean, I really love seeing all the queer assertiveness over the years on the ramp, on the catwalks. I'm not very sure, you said earlier that fashion has been an inclusive place, and I've written about this as well. But that comes with a caveat. I think fashion has been an inclusive place for queer people because we generate way more value than is given to us. But I think so people have kind of included and respected us because we actually do great work for lower costs and things like that. But I don't think it has been fair to queer people all the time, because there are many fashion labels where everyone will pretend to be queer friendly, and they will even go out with queer friendly campaigns and things like that. But if you talk to the HR people and ask them basic stuff like, do you offer same-sex partnership benefits to your existing queer employees, they will not be doing it. So I think now, even in fashion, we need to stop beyond this of, yes, fashion is an inclusive place, yes, and ask these difficult questions and say, but to what extent? Are you just accepting us because, we're doing good things for you? Or are you really serving us like you serve your straight employees? I think those questions.
Parmesh, fashion serves nobody. So no, fashion can be cruel, which is why what I find really interesting is that it still is a safe space for creatives in the way that we form our own cocoons.
Yeah.
Okay. And so much of what I'm hearing from everyone is that the world is not making the world safe for you. We are making our own cocoons and making it safe. And then what someone like Roshni does is she takes her own life and puts it out for a lot of hatred. And I'm appalled, Roshni, at the shit I see that comes your way. And yet you put it out because you're trying to create not only a safe space for other people, you put your mother and your Ajji there, and you actually respond to everybody who writes to you, and you say, I hope I can make it better. And then you connect them with other people. And our conversation is going off a little bit, but yes, I would love to, I will ask you all your fashion questions later. But Roshni, how do you then use your fashion moments and then talk about safety and then open the world for these conversations? I mean, I find that so powerful that I went through your handle. I've gone through it, like I said, for a long time, but this morning I was actually in tears.
Honestly, I'm just trying to do, like I said before, what Baby Rosh didn't have, and I just want to give that as much as I can to others. Because all these issues like body image issues, or just questioning your sexuality, it's not age restrictive. It happens to everyone. It's universal. And if you have that one person or that one space, you can go and actually be yourself and express yourself, is something what I needed. I'm a 90s baby, so when for me fashion was looking at all the pop stars where they embrace their sexuality as women, wearing bikinis on stage, and just embracing it so nicely. Also seeing like Fresh Prince wear all these prints that he looked so good in. I wanted to do both, but I was so riddled with insecurities. I wore black and gray everywhere just to cover my body, wore layers because I was so upset with how my body looked because it didn't look a certain way. But then when I came to the other side of it in the recent few years, I realized I can do it all. I can wear whatever the hell I want. Even under this, I'm wearing my favorite bikini, and I'm wearing like I'm wearing this on top. So this is how I dress every day now, and I want people to know that this is something you can do. You don't need to follow rules. Fashion does not have rules. You make the rules. You can express yourself however you want. If your inspiration is Christina Aguilera and Will Smith from Fresh Prince, then make them both your style, and just put them all into yours. And that's exactly why I choose to be extra vulnerable on Instagram, because I feel like real talk is needed. As much as we want to be, Instagram is a space where we're supposed to be just one person, and I want everyone to see all sides of me. I'm a bad bitch, I know, but I'm also vulnerable, and I cry, and I know I have emotions, and I've gone through so much in my life. I want you to know about it so that you guys feel like you're not alone, because I think the only thing that everyone wants to hear sometimes is you're not alone. What you're going through is it's something everyone is going through. And I feel like if Instagram becomes a space that puts more real conversations like that, or people just start sharing their lives so openly, it's going to make it safer for other people who are, even the followers, even for queer people especially. Instagram is great for queer people because we can do anything and put it out, and we get, of course, a lot of hate because of course there's homophobes and transphobes everywhere. And but we also get so much appreciation. I follow this boy who's like 10 years old, and he does makeup videos and drag videos, and I'm obsessed with him. I'm like, at 10 years you're doing this? I wish that was me. I'm doing it now. But I think vulnerability is strength, and I want everyone to know that. And that's why I put my life out there on a plate, because I have nothing to hide. I want people to know that you have nothing to hide either, and that you can just be who you want to be. Like there's no fear, because I lived in too much fear. I don't want anyone else to live in that fear.
So, in a sense, clothing also brought you incredible joy while it made you miserable for a while. And the blacks and the layers, you use them to hide. And that is again the power of clothing, whether you wear an armor or you wear this. But liberating clothing is also very liberating, right? Could you talk a little bit about what you did with clothing as an example of your liberation? Wearing it, taking it off, all of it.
I've always, like I said, I was so scared of how I looked because I didn't look a certain type. But I also loved my body when I was, after a point, when I started when I stood in front of the mirror to see myself, I realized it wasn't as horrible as I thought it was. It's not as ugly as I thought it was. It was because of people and standards and other toxic things that were coming onto me that I felt that way. So when I started liking my body, I didn't want to hide it anymore. I wanted to, just not even just show skin because I have to. It's because I was so comfortable now. After covering my body for years, I didn't ever think in my lifetime I would wear a bikini. I had accepted it that people like you don't get to wear bikinis, because you don't fit that body type. Literally what was in my head as a child. And I've always wanted to wear glitter bikinis and wear what Christina Aguilera was doing on stage. But I was like, you can't do such things. So when I reached that place of comfort where I was absolutely okay with my body, the way it looked, it doesn't have to be, adhering to any beauty standards. It's okay if there's, you don't have a flat stomach, but it's still beautiful. I was like, fuck all of that. I'm going to wear bikinis every day. Let's see what people say. So I think that's why even on Instagram, all my posts, don't have that much clothes on, because I genuinely don't like it anymore. I like being this person where I wear whatever I want. I feel very comfortable. And when I used to wear like layers of, clothes before, I used to wear it in hot sun and sweat through it. I would rather die in sweat than show my body. I used to be so uncomfortable. So now when I'm so comfortable, I decided I'll wear and only things that I want to wear. So even when I step out in, very extra clothes, but I do wear my bikinis almost every other day with a jacket or something and like shorts and stuff. All things I didn't, ever think I could wear as a person in my whole lifetime. So once that liberation came, I had to pass it on. I want to pass it on to others because everyone should have this. I see body image issues going all the way till my grandmother, who's like in her 80s. So, someone has to, like, there has to be a stop to this. Why are we made to hate ourselves for no reason?
Parmesh is dying to say something. Just unmute yourself.
No, that is so beautiful. I was just like, as you were talking, I was remembering my own childhood. I wrote about this particular incident in Kyrgyzstan when I was very young. I was in school. I was obsessed with neon. I had this Madonna shorts that I had very excitedly got, and I just wore it. And that was that. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, so I had like these neon Madonna shorts, and I had these power sneakers. Remember power sneakers with one pink lace and one green lace, and I was just so excited to go to my school sports day. And then I was bullied, and my classmates bullied me. They pulled my shorts down, and I was so embarrassed. I ran all the way home from the sports ground to home, and it was interesting because to me that was a transformative moment, because to me that is pivotal, right? A lot of people who are bullied at that minute choose to say, okay, this is the world operates. They don't understand me. Maybe I will kind of conform and not wear neon Madonna shorts and these things. And this is, hide that aspect of myself. But I made a conscious choice that time saying, screw the world. So fashion, in that sense, I was like, this is who I am. And I just need to figure out how to navigate this. And so it's very interesting. And I write about how years later, I was in GQ for 3 years in the best dressed list in a row. And I was like, it's so interesting that none of my bullies, whose names also now I don't remember, I didn't see any of them, all around me in those pages. The kind of people I saw were Keshav and others who kind of all dressed, in a way that I thought was cool growing up. So I think it's interesting. I think, we often in the queer community, but also I think straight people as well, because we're living in a world where it's not just queer people who are victimized for our non-conformity. I have so many straight friends who love fashion, who've gone through terrible bullying growing up, where they have to justify, like, but you're straight. So, I mean, so I think it's been, at least for me, as you were speaking, Roshni, I was reminded of, this moment and how we can, when we choose to claim our own agency, and it can happen at any age, the power that resides in us. And then when we become agents of that change, and so beautifully as you do, share our vulnerabilities with others, how we can inspire so many other people to not have these childhoods and to have better childhoods. So that's why I was nodding violently.
You know what I remember about my days in Godrej, and I moved from L to Godrej, and I remember sort of crying a little because everybody was in a sea of gray. And I just could not believe that clothing meant so little to people when you come to work. I wear black every single day, but that's a choice I've made. What I saw Parmesh doing through clothing, and that's how I remembered, I realized fashion can be so important. He would wear these really beautiful clothes that everybody came and spoke to him about, and he allowed them to touch his clothes, and he talked about his clothes. But equally, if somebody wore something different or a little bright, he talked to them about their clothing, and he used fashion to liberate them from their idea of what their gender could talk about. And he used it to increase awareness, but also to allow creativity to flow. Was that something you developed, Parmesh, or was it something that was natural to you? Or is that how fashion should be talked about, to cross all boundaries and set people actually free?
It's part of my great plan of queering the world. I mean, everything I do is strategic. What I say, what I wear, what I do, it's all planned. Nothing is spontaneous. So this smile that's coming right now, I planned it like 3 hours ago. No, I'm kidding. It's not to that level, but everything. So I queer with great intent. I look at every interaction as a possibility of changing one mind, changing one opinion, bringing an ally on board. And I'm very much about calling in people into our movement, because I think for queer equality, liberation, a joyous queer future, we need straight allies like you, Nonita, and everyone else, right? So every opportunity is a moment to call people into our movement. So everything is, so of course, my body, my clothes, the way I curate, if I get positions of power, how I'm going to use that platform. You just have to give me half a platform. I will queer it. If I'm helping edit a magazine, whether it's for a few months or for a few years, if I have that platform, of course I will hire queer talent, queer artists, commission stories about queer themes, do queer, I'm talking about Verve in this case, do queer things like a complete black and white issue followed by an art exhibition, followed by a Michael Jackson party where we only played the song Black or White on loop. I'm just saying, to me, these are very queer concepts. It's conceptual. If I'm working in a corporation like Godrej, I will use every moment of my personality, my clothes, every interaction to change, to engage. And I use this term in my book. I call it Jugaad resistance, where you kind of infiltrate into the system and bring about change from within. So I've been very grateful that there are many queer sleeper cells of change happening all across our country. And actually, many of them sit in Lalit and all over as well. Because I think, Keshav, what you've done through the fact of, as you said earlier, right, queer people have been hired, but you've put queer people up front and center. So now anyone who checks in has to encounter either someone who's gender non-conforming or an acid attack victim, or right? You've put your diverse talent up front and center for the world to not ignore. And each interaction then is a possibility for change, right? So yeah, Nonita, it's all planned.
Keshav, how does it feel to be part of this greater plan? And what are you doing to further this conversation?
I just want to say how much in awe of Roshni I am, because I think what she just said, like Parmesh said, that it made him, it reminded him of his childhood. It made me, I haven't come to terms with my body images, and I still find it very difficult for me to wear a swimming costume sometimes in front of my friends and family, and to swim. And I love swimming. I've been a water baby since I was a kid. So I think I wish I had you when I was growing up. I wish I had some, and it's so important for you to continue sharing your voice on social media. And I myself have taken myself away from social media because I just couldn't deal with it anymore. But that was my personal journey. And however, that sort of pushed me to make sure that my foundation, my work, whether it's the Keshav Suri Foundation, Kidisu also, and the It Gets Better India, all of these projects then started actually becoming more center stage when I took myself out of the social media and the attention as well away. But I think for you, we need role models like you, especially for the kids out there. And this is not just for LGBTQ kids only. This is for every kid out there that suffers from any sort of body shaming or body dysmorphia, which is a big thing right now. And I see that a lot, especially in the pandemic. I also wanted to just add to the fabulous Parmesh's points on, I, by the way, have now got Queeristan in all my suites and all over Srinagar right now, which is the hotel that is doing the best right now in this thing, because people want to go to the hills. And so everybody, and the who's who is checking into Srinagar, and they're all seeing a copy of Queeristan.
Have you bookmarked it to your wedding page? Have you bookmarked it just right there?
Maybe. Yeah, okay. Maybe on my journey of becoming less self-indulgent. But yeah, we've got Queeristan, we've got Saurabh Kirpal's book on Sex in the Supreme Court, which has essays from Ritu Dalmia, from Zainab Patel, myself as well. We've got, of course, the rainbow flag, which has the black and brown Lives Matter colors, as well as the trans colors, as a part on which flies high 365 days in a year across the country, including Srinagar. So, the fact that I somehow have a small hand in playing in this, it's something that I don't know. I mean, you can't not say it and then think that you'd have this giant inflated ego. But I think that it is more because of the people that I have interacted with, I think it's them that has actually led to the Lalit and Kirisu being this sort of inclusive space. It's more their voices, their struggles. I can, sit over here and cry about my issues and my, coming out and my body issues, but it's not 0.1% the struggle of all the people that have worked with me, that I have interacted with. I can propagate causes for sure. I definitely bring up people who are acid attack survivors, differently able people, make sure my policies are in place, make sure that my HR is in place, make sure I have hired them, make sure that all the queer people that walk inside feel safe. But what I can't do is walk in their shoes. Their journeys and their struggles are definitely what should take center stage. And I think that by a person like me and in a hotel chain like me, to put them up front is an opportunity for my customers, who are all of you on this call, to take that step and be like, hey, how are you doing? Tell me about yourself. Let's not, okay, Lalit is doing this, Kirisu is doing it, sure, but why don't you talk to me about you? What has been your journey? And I think that is probably why I guess I did this in the first place.
Keshav, but I must say, when I came to Kirisu, of course, with my drag queen friends, and it's been the safest place for me to come be as a woman, because when I go out to clubs, I still can't wear my glitter bikini and just walk out, But in Kirisu, I can take off everything and I'm still safe, And that was unbelievable. I was so I stayed there till everything shut, because I was like, I want to leave. What is this place? And you honestly, to give that safe space for not just queer people, but women and other people who are just so, I can't wear the kind of clothes I actually want to wear every day because of the kind of place we live in. I can't.
Yeah,
but
of course.
I can do that at Kirisu. I can do that at your hotel, and that's amazing. What you've done is absolutely amazing. I know so many of my friends like Durga and Luna and all of them. So I keep telling them how it's absolutely incredible that someone's doing something like this, because this is how actual changes happen. Like Parmesh was saying, you need people in power to make those changes. Otherwise, we just keep talking about them and it doesn't happen. It's all tokenism at the end of the day. You want to just appreciate the queer community, but are you really doing anything? You're actually doing it, and it's incredible, honestly.
I love that clothing is at the center of all of this change, and I think this has been an incredible conversation, and it's kind of almost fitting to end it with what RuPaul said, that we're all born naked and the rest is drag. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is the season finale of the Lakmé Fashion Week podcast, and I can't think of a better way to end the season than a conversation with three of you, to clothes, to being fabulous and being extravagant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having us.